My name is Charles Kropke. I am the author of a book, South Beach Stories of a Renaissance. It is the story of the comeback of South Beach through the social and entrepreneurs that were responsible for making the modern day South Beach what it is today. Let me introduce this panel. First we have Luis Canales in the end. And Luis actually was very early on the scene, one of the first club owners and promoters involved in a lot of the club action as early as the 1970s. Next to him we have Lee Schrager. Lee is the founder of the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. So all of you food connoisseurs and wine lovers out there, you can thank this man for shining the light on South Beach and the South Florida area. Next to him, we have Jane Wooldridge. Jane is the business editor for the Miami Herald. She is a columnist. She is a writer who's done a series of books on travel. She switches hats as fast as some of us switch clothing. So Jane has a lot of great talents that she brings to us. And she wrote an early column on nightlife on South Beach in the early years. Next to her, we have David Wallach. David owns the very famous Mango's Tropical Cafe on Ocean Drive. You can't pass it without turning your head. So, welcome, David. And finally, last but not least, Michael Capponi. Michael is the club impresario. I don't think any modern clubs in this era opened without his blessing or without his support. So we have the greatest panel to discuss the nightlife and entertainment. So we'll get started. Let's go back to the 1970s. And Louis, you're going to help us out here. I think, Jane, you might be able to comment a little bit on what you saw afterwards, But in the 1970s, you opened a club.
Excuse me. It's actually the 80s, not the 70s.
Okay, there we go.
I'm old, but I'm not quite good.
Okay, the 1980s. Actually, be specific, because you opened up a club let's make the name here.
You're probably referring to Semper's?
That's correct, Semper's.
And it was that was actually from 1989 to 1992. It was the first nightclub on Ocean Drive. It was also the first private club on Ocean Drive. It was at the basement of the Waldorf Hotel. At the time, it was most of the footprint of the hotel. With the changes that came with the Compass Market and Compass Cafe, they built kitchens in the back, so the space is now smaller where the club was located. It was the first club in Miami to have karaoke, and it was hosted by Tara Solomon at the time. And we had theme nights along with karaoke. Again, it was...
So let's tell me, who were your clientele in that era, the late 1980s? Who was coming to the clubs? What was the profile of your guests?
Us.
Besides the rest of our panel,
And Michael was underage, but we still...
I couldn't get in.
That era in the 80s, actually the first nightclub to open was Phil Smith Club Z at 1235 Washington. That was known as the Studio 54 of the South. That was actually the only club that was in South Beach. It was around, I believe, for 2 or 3 years. The first club of the new South Beach was opened by George Tamset in 1986. It was called Club Ovo, which in Italian means egg, at 1450 Collins Avenue, where Jerry's Deli is right now.
Okay.
That same year, Gary Farmer opened up the Strand on Washington Avenue. And those were that along with Club Deuce, were the 3 anchors of South Beach at the time. The next big club to open was John and Tommy Turchin with Riccarino, Club New on 22nd Street.
23rd.
23rd, you're absolutely correct, 23rd Street. And I was there every night for 2 years. And rapidly after that, after Club New opened, we had an opening it was a new club opening almost every 2 months, including Lee Schrager's by now famous Torpedo on Collins in late '88, early '89.
Okay, so And actually, a couple of you actually recognized when he said Club Deuce, but for the rest of you in the audience who don't know Club Deuce, that's 222 14th Street, Max Club Deuce, the oldest bar in town, and I think it hasn't changed a spot since it opened originally opened in the 30s. So,
the profile of the clientele at the time, most of New South Beach were part of the arts community. There were artists at the time. You could get, and of course there was the South Florida Art Center on Lincoln Road, which was most of Lincoln Road. The rest was boarded up. At the time, you could lease space for about $5 a square foot, triple net, 10-year lease. So there were mostly artist studios and across the range of disciplines. So you had that core group of people here. Generally in gentrification, my experience when I lived in Soho, later in Hoboken, then I went back home to the city, but my experience always in gentrification, it's the artist community that comes in, and they're looking for cheap space in which to be able to live and work. The artist community generally is a motley crew. It's all about the art. It transcends race, creed, background, sexual orientation, or gender, and that was the beginning of the folks here. And there's a food chain in the gentrification of a place and then it ties in with the nightlife.
Right, absolutely.
And because it's a motley crew, most of the gay women and men in the arts community have gay yuppie friends, back then it was called, who are turned on to the area, they start coming in, and then that's when it starts getting purdy and upscale. And then those people in turn have their straight yuppie friends, and those are the ones that follow suit. So at the very beginning, it was this motley crew of very creative people. We all had different, whether we're developers or business owners or just those of us that lived here, we all had different agendas, but we all shared in the same vision. And it was seeing something here that the locals did not get.
Right.
An absolutely beautiful beach, the need of gentrification, which was known in South Florida at the time, cheap rents, and cheap lifestyle. Again, you could rent an apartment in Morton Towers, which is now, what is it called now? On West Avenue and
Flamingo.
A 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom was $210 a month. You could go to lunch at Porto Sagua. Lunch special was $3.50. You could go to the Deuce and go home bombed for $6. And you could rent a room on an Ocean Drive hotel for anywhere from $18 to $30 a night.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So that's the beginning. And again, most people were afraid of South Beach at the time because in the early '80s there was Marielle, and then once you know the background, then I'll turn it over for the rest of the people to bring you up to date. And it was, again, at that time, I remember at the first club openings, we had to do open bar for 3 hours and free valet parking to get people to cross the causeway to come into Miami Beach. We also had to be quirky with the entertainment that we brought over to attract a full range of folks to come over. And that was the very beginning in the mid-'80s of the nightlife. And then I'll let the rest of the panel carry on.
We'll actually be probably coming back to you a little bit. So that was great history. Great history. So Jane, you started writing a column about this club life. When did that column come around?
Well, first off, when I came to the Miami Herald, I came here to interview in 1983 from New York.
Okay.
And they put me up in this hot new area called South Beach, and it was the in thing, and you started to hear a little bit about it in New York. So they put me up at the Carlisle, and went next door, and I got in really late, as one does from New York and stuff. Went next door to the Cardoza, and I was going to go for a walk, and the people at the hotel said, "Oh, you can't do that." And I'm looking at them like, "Wait a minute, I live in New York. What are you talking about?" And I walk about 5 blocks, and it was right after Marielle, and I came back and I said, "No, you're right, I can't walk here." And so in those days, it was really a very different place. I had been doing a variety of things, but at any rate, I apparently came to the Miami Herald and never quite managed to leave because I'm still there and I've had 87 jobs since then. But there came this time that in fact the beach, you could walk around. And no matter where you went any night, and I had this bizarre job where I covered everything from clubs and parties to, remember the one where he was eating? Lee and I used to also be on the ball circuit, and I found Lee standing outside the ball that he was organizing one night, and there's a whole different story. Do you remember that?
Which hotel?
It was the
Castle?
yes,
Hirschfeld?
yes, it was the
Hirschfeld,
Hirschfeld.
sure.
And Abe was picking the. I was trying to ask him why he'd left Lee standing outside because he just decided after Lee had set up the whole party that he wasn't going to let Lee in. And so
Which actually was great for me because I sued him, which is the money I used to start my club.
See, so it worked out great. But
A little known
it
fact.
worked out great. But what happened was, so Abe's not letting Lee in, and I've gone in. I'm going, now, Abe, why are you doing this? And he's standing there picking the pansies out of the salad and eating them. And I'm thinking, if there is ever a more surreal moment than interviewing somebody who's picking the leaves out of the salad, I mean the flowers, while I'm saying, now you really should let Lee in, Abe. But anyway, so wherever you were, whatever you were doing, you always ended up back at the Strand. And that was, I mean, it didn't matter whether you were, and Natalie Thomas, anybody who's been around for a while,
She
remember
Facebooked
Natalie?
me yesterday.
Yeah, she did. I've heard from her too. So Natalie was the maitre d', and she knew everybody, and there would be these people who would have to wait for hours, but if you were a local, because you were essentially there every night, you know, you got to go in and sit down, and that was a really good thing because it was the kind of place that was really like a club. It was a much better version of something like Cheers, except that it was much hipper, and a really neighborhood place. And you could go in a ball gown, you could go in shorts, you could go in anything, and it was really a neighborhood place.
If you
and
could
you'd
get
end
table
up,
from Natalie.
no. Well, Natalie liked me though.
Natalie was this
What'd you do wrong?
No, Natalie was this beautiful black girl.
Stunning.
But she had amazing attitude. In the early years of the Strand, you could go in there and she'd be at the desk by herself, right when you walked in, and she would not look up at you. And it didn't matter who came in, and she would walk through that dining room. It's funny because she actually did face me yesterday. We haven't spoken in 20 years. So the timing, and I mean, really, she ran that restaurant like nothing I've ever seen. To this day, I've never seen anyone, a hostess quite like Natalie Thomas.
She was absolutely amazing. And so the Strand really was the nexus of the reliable kind of life, where you knew you could find people that you knew, and mostly that you liked. And I would go, and I would go to 3 to 5 parties a night, to the point that my clothes could have gone out without me, and some days I wished they would. And you would, start at some black tie charity thing and end up at some club, and all of this gets written about in the course of a weekend or something. And then you'd end up back at the Strand. And it was so great that I decided I was moving to South Beach. I was living on the other side of the water, and there were not very many. This was the very early 90s. There weren't a whole lot of us living here. And I bought the first Art Deco condo rehab, and I know this because when I went to get comps, there weren't any. And we actually had to talk the bank, I had to talk the bank into financing because they just couldn't imagine why anybody of any substance would possibly want to live on South Beach. But it was just so obvious if you had come from somewhere else, like New York, where you look around and you go, great buildings, beach, what's wrong with these people? You know where real estate values are going. And in fact, some people have done very well knowing where real estate values were going here.
Absolutely, Jane. That's great. Now you get this great sense of how small the community was back then, because all these people knew each other. They claimed that Michael here was actually too young to actually be admitted into the bars, but somehow he was promoting on the beach. So, Michael, did you have anything to do with the early promotions on some of these clubs, or when did you first come onto the scene with your promotion?
I was a surfer when there was the pier down on First Street before Penrod's was built. And one day on the beach, Bruce Weber showed up, and all the surfers were like, "Yeah, he's gonna scout one of us to." And I wasn't the pretty one, but my friends got picked, and eventually, at least through my goggles, a lot of models in the fashion industry started moving in, and the Cameo was doing a punk rock, Sex Pistols and all that was performing there. And we formed a group of, just young kids. We formed something called Global Tribe. It was me, Ruben Pagan, Don Busweiler, and it was like we converted it on Friday nights, the Cameo Theater. So like this early hip hop, I think the early hip hop movement was just starting, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, and all that. And so that was the very first thing I think I did. I was probably 16.
So they're telling the truth.
Yeah. I was also a busboy at a Club New, but I lied about my age, then I got fired. And then I was a busboy at the Palace Bar and Grill, and I would skateboard, and Steve Polisar would say, here's some flyers, and go down Ocean Drive on your skateboard and pass them out to the good-looking people, see if anybody could show up and get some business in the restaurant. And I would be like, okay, give me $5 for every person I bring into the restaurant. And at the end of the day, you'd have to give me a couple $100. And then that's how the promotional business started. So through the years, clubs kept opening up, right? But we were doing this like Louis said, it was a very artsy, bohemian, scene. The first cool nights I think that we did was Saturday nights at the Warsaw Ballroom. So what happened is, after Stephen Z's club, there was, can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you go.
So this group called Paragon bought that club, which is 1235, which is what Mansion is today. And so they took all the gay clientele on Saturday nights and kind of left Warsaw Ballroom empty on Saturday night. So we went there and we're like, we have a whole bunch of cool bohemian people, let's do Saturday nights there. They're like, it'll never work, there's no way a crowd will ever go there. And with a combination, Lee was always there with us, there was the spot across the street with Gary James, and so we did this night called Bohemia. And to me, that was, Louis was years earlier than me, but that's kind of like really my beginning. And it was a very different time. It was a really beautiful time. To me, it defined kind of the early 90s of South Beach. I remember, it's funny, because today nightclubs are, you need a table, it's going to be $3,000. And when we were doing this, I remember Eddie Murphy once came into Warsaw and he's like, I want a VIP section and a table. And I was like, there's no way this guy's a VIP. There's no such thing as VIPs. Everybody's equal. It's like, and he wanted a rope around him. I was like, no way. I was like, everybody's the same here. And it was about dancing and understanding the music. And I think a lot of the European nightclub owners were, let's open a club in Miami, and all of a sudden these things started popping up everywhere. There was the birth of Amnesia nightclub, and Van Douche, and the Loft, but every time they opened, they were so removed from what was really happening here in South Beach. They came with their disco lights, and and nobody would go. So then they'd have to hire us, and we'd have to almost destroy everything they did. They thought disco lights were in. We'd put trees everywhere and give everybody tambourines and put all the lights dim and play the Doors and so it was really a really great time.
Talk about entrepreneurship. To start on the skateboard, that's actually someone else among us, David Wallach, snuck up on everyone in a sense with Mangoes. He started small with his cafe, and it just kept building and building. And as he told the story to me for the book, he was kind of taking a look at each element, and then when he saw something really interesting, he would add that to the mix, and eventually Mangoes boomed. It was actually, you hit on it when you had someone from Santana came in and introduced some music that was that changed things up a little bit. And so why don't you tell us, David, how you snuck upon the scene here with the ultra popular Mangoes?
Well, I hit the beach in 1955. and did elementary school on Washington Avenue. And I was just reminiscing a little while ago, but in the day that I was gifted in being able to live on South Beach, Mid Beach, and North Beach. And I spanned into North Beach in junior high. And so my friends were from, North and South Beach were two different worlds. You had uptown and downtown. South Beach, and when you got to First Street, that was Bum City. So that was dangerous, and that was Bum City, and that was the cutting edge. And then the dog track and all that was, gang city as well as, romantic city. But I was surfing I was just, when you said that, Michael, I was surfing in 1965, and my parents thought I'd become a surf bum. And so that's when they packed me off to military school in my, in my senior year. But I had friends there, so it was cool with me, and I actually excelled when I got away from home. One thing I'd like to say is you're looking at a group of great artists. And to be in the Wolfsonian and do this is really cool, because to listen to each of these people, I knew this would be cool. Because they just bring back, I lived in 78, I opened the Eastern Sun, which was a pioneer concept in care for the elderly, when that was my world, and actually the first underground hospice that was here in all of South Florida. But, and that was where we were doing great food and great music. It was all about great food and entertainment. So then all of a sudden, here's Semper's next door. Next door. And all of these clubs and all of these people's work were my stomping ground, because I lived at 900 Ocean Drive. I had my recording studio in my bed. That's all I needed, as well as that was like my medical career. But then when I got with Mark Soika, and the Ocean Drive clique was like the Ocean Drive clique, that was like a different world. And we went to at least I did, not Mark, but every opening that these guys had was like, wow, come on, let's go. Lynn Parks is sitting here. She was one of Miami Beach's great photographers. And we went to these openings together back then.
Still is, by the way.
But these guys are just great artists. And they also had the additional twist of being great business people. And that was what really set all of these people off from the rest. Just a great artist got eaten up on South Beach.
Right.
I wasn't such a good business person.
Then you had someone. Then you had someone with you.
I wasn't a good business person.
Well, then you had to have someone next to you that was, because the bottom line is you always had to make sure the money got to the bank, and either you were counting it yourself, or you got robbed. It's really just that simple. So South Beach is still a wild place, and the evolution. People would say in the early days, and these guys were the pioneers. I mean, they were cutting edge. You're looking at cutting edge, and so my doing Mangoes came right through going to these guys' parties, and what they were doing is each creating their party. And it got cool. And all of a sudden, the traffic backed up past the toll booth by the airport, past the toll booth to get to South Beach. Why? Because of these people. And that is really something that is a great accolade. And by the way, while we are on air, and I have to point out also, Michael is doing such incredible work in Haiti since the earthquake,
yes.
And remarkable work, and to me it's the absolute accolade and the highest achievement of his great life.
we're actually going to get to the topic of, you know, the evolution where all of you are now, because it is very interesting how you all started in a nightlife club business and how time is actually, you're still around that world, but have added so much more to it. So Lee, the late bloomer, I wouldn't say you're not a good businessman. Look at you now, you know, the Wine and Food Festival, my God. So, but you know, you were kind of quiet there for a moment, and everyone kept pointing and saying Lee was there, and of course Lee was there. So it sounds like you were right in the middle of everything all the time.
I had one of the early clubs, as Louis noted. I opened a club in the late 80s called Torpedo at 6th and Collins, which is now where MAC Cosmetics is. And then partnered with Gary James at the Spot on Espanola Way. We had actually opened, I had Torpedo at 6th and Collins. I had opened up a health food restaurant next door called Chow, if any of you use C-H-O-W. And then at the same time, Gary James and I opened up on Espanola Way. And Gary should be on this panel. Gary James, yeah, great. Avenue
Yeah.
Really the early. So I had Torpedo, I had Chow, and then Gary and I opened up a club, a dinner club on Espanola Way called ESP, right across from the Warsaw.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, a lot of people did. And then I kind of got, you know, I then sold my shares in ESP to Mickey Rourke. And then Gary and Mickey Rourke did ESP together. So, you know, that was really my, you know, it's funny when I think back to the earliest days of South Beach, right away I focus on Versace. And Versace coming here, because the first time that Johnny ever came to Miami, I actually picked him up at the airport. A friend of mine was opening up the Versace boutique, Melissa Sardinia, in Bal Harbor. And the store was way behind, the grand opening party was that night, and she said, Lee, please go in the car, take the car, and go pick up Johnny at the airport. And I remember taking him to the airport, picking him up at the airport, and he was staying at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And I remember checking him into the Fontainebleau, going up to his room with him and his partner, Antonio, and then going to the Frank Sinatra suite. And he said, oh, I can't possibly stay here. And I said, well, what do you mean? We actually moved him within hours to the Marlin Hotel, which later became his home while he was building Versace Mansion. And I remember, you know, one of my favorite stories is the next morning after the opening of the Versace boutique, Johnny had invited us after the opening that night. He invited us to the Strand for dinner. And that was really the beginning of his love for South Beach. And the next morning, I met him for breakfast at the News Cafe, which is where he probably went every single day that he lived, you know, before he was living down here,
right.
When he was partying down here, Johnny having coffee and breakfast at the News Cafe. And I remember meeting him for breakfast months later, and he was sketching. I'll never forget, he was sketching on the back of pads. He had pads and pads and pads of sketches, and that was the beginning of the Versace collection. Yeah, so that, you know, those are really and so it was really amazing. And funny story, we were talking about early investments. I remember years ago when the Amsterdam Palace, and for those of you who don't remember the Amsterdam Palace, it's now Versace's home.
Right.
And I remember a girlfriend of mine, one of my best friends, had just gotten divorced from a very wealthy man, had some money, and the Amsterdam Palace was for sale. And it was for $600,000, which at that time, you know, was crazy money. And my girlfriend said, we should do something. Let's open up a hotel in it. I said, I don't know anything, you know, I don't know. And she spoke to her ex-husband, who she was friendly with, and was a developer. He said, South Beach is never going to happen. He said, if you take that money and put it into the Amsterdam Palace, he said, you'll have nothing left. That's my earliest memories of South Beach. That and Lums at the bottom of, yes. Anyone can remember on Lincoln Road, Lums, I remember when Nelson Fox was selling, what's the name of the building where, the News Cafe? No, on Lincoln Road, Van Dyke.
Van Dyke.
When the Van Dyke was for sale, I remember Nelson Fox showing it to me for $300,000.
Oh my word.
Well, I'm going to say probably right when I had the club, so 88 $300,000, and looking at Lums was a rundown, and I remember walking up the stairs to go look at the view, and I'm like, oh my God, this view is really amazing. So those were two pieces of property that I didn't take advantage of. Probably should have.
Right.
And the date that he's talking about was December 27th, 1991. And with Versace at Bal Harbour, it was actually the renovation that Melissa Gottlieb Sardinia had done of it. And Sam Robin, the interior designer, did the work for it. I did the opening. And what was fun about it that amazed Mr. Versace was that what they call in the fashion world, tout le monde, meaning anybody that's anybody, was at that opening. And from Winter to Andre Leontali to Claudia Schiffer to Naomi Campbell, every single fashion person that was of any consequence in the world was at Bal Harbour Shops at that opening, and that blew the gentleman's
How do you remember
mind
the
away.
date?
I'm amazed.
Because I did
That's
the
amazing.
I don't know where my keys
I did the
No,
opening.
yeah.
Well,
Oh,
Louis, that's a great segue because I want you to, in each of your perspective, I want you to name the celebrity person to you that was the most significant. I don't know, Lee might have said it was, that for him it was Gianni Versace, but, going down the row, I wanted you to tell me what, even if it pertains to you and the development of your career.
It changes over the years. It's a kaleidoscope. In 86, 87, the stars coming to South Beach were the cutting edge folks. They were the performers. It was the East Village crowd, which at the time included people like Marc Jacobs, Fred Schneider from the B-52s, John Sex and the Bodacious Tatas. We can go, Joey Arias, we can go on and on. It was Gary Farmer with Audrey and Mark Bank when they opened up the Strand. Gary had been the former maitre d' at Indochine. Prior to that, he operated at the Odeon in downtown New York. So when he came to South Beach and opened up the Strand, he brought that whole downtown sensibility along. So the people you would run into at the Strand at the time were people like Philip Glass and Lauren Hutton and Keith Haring. It was that whole, again, downtown intellectual type of scene. When Andrew Delaplane opened up Scratch the following year, what he attracted to his restaurant, the Delaplanes are an old blue book, that's a social register in Miami, family. They attracted what I used to call the Bal Harbour debutantes and the Coconut Grove Gables crowd, and that was their introduction to South Beach. About the same time, David Colby and Willie Moser opened up the Century. Fashion background, they originally came to Miami because they had a magazine that came out every month featuring a location for photographers. They came to Miami, they fell in love with Miami. I gave them a party at Club New in '87 for their magazine. They also published an amazing magazine called Manipulator, which was actually the size of a coffee table book. And I actually saw it on eBay, and I had like 20 of them that I didn't keep, but they're going for about $3,000 a piece now. And when they opened up the Century, they brought the whole European, Thierry Mugler, Jean-Paul Gaultier, you name all the fashion mavens, all the fashion people from Europe, and they were headquartered in there. And what was fun about the Strand and the Century, that it was walking into one of those Hirschberg cartoons. Because you would be at this level, and there's Paloma Picasso, and there's Thierry Mugler, and there's Lauren Hutton, and there's Claudia Schiffer, and there's Gianni Versace. And because the paparazzi were not here, they were free to be themselves. And it was that freedom that we gave them, and we protected them at the time.
That's great.
That made it so exciting because, again, you would be on the dance floor and it would be Madonna. You would turn around and it was Madonna. That things like that, years later, would never have happened. So it evolved over the years as when it came to the celebrities.
Thank you, Louis. That was a great walk down memory lane. His memory lane, too. Thank you. Why don't you take another shot at it, Lee? The celebrity that kind of personified for you and your actions here, the person that...
I would have to say it was Versace, probably a combination of Versace, Jean-Paul Gaultier, and Madonna.
Okay.
You know, I remember I'd walk into our club on Thursday night at Torpedo and walk in, there they were all at the bar. I mean, we had happy hour, and at 6 o'clock in the night, they'd all be there together. clearly remember walking in and seeing that one night. So but Versace is really the one to me that put it on the map. I mean, I think there were lots of people, you know, right after him, but I think it was Versace's.
It was the seal of approval.
It was a seal of approval. I mean, that's what really brought it down. And I remember, you know, years ago being at the Century Hotel, which still in my mind had one of the greatest Sunday brunches on this beach, and JFK being there when he was dating
Daryl Hannah.
Daryl Hannah, and seeing them all the times. And you know, it's just so strange to walk in and see JFK Jr. clearly, and Daryl Hannah.
Good.
Thank you.
I think I'd have to also say that Versace was that sort of pivotal moment, but I had come out of I had covered fashion in New York before I came here. And so all of the fashion people were here, but what was really interesting was that it was such a wide range of people. I mean, it was, you know, all the music. There was a moment when we actually had musicians, which sort of scattered away, but there were musicians, there were social people, there were some art people, although that came a little bit later. But there were a lot of sort of interesting business people that you didn't necessarily. I mean, you could go into your place and, you know, find myself sitting next to some guy who was head of Freddie Mac then, which was not a dirty word. And so there were all these different business people, and then it got to be such a scene. I remember one night being at Mickey Wolfson's, which isn't exactly South Beach, and Mickey was doing some charity thing, and O.J. Simpson, the first iteration before. And I remember, like, there was a pile of people, and we all got in this, you know, limo, and it's OJ, and it's OJ's best 500 friends, and it's, you know, whoever else it is, and we go all over Dade County. And by then, the beach was so crowded that we were now moving off of the beach to go out, which seemed bizarre even then. And you just ended up going around all night long with all these people who were suddenly, you know, everybody's new best friends. But by then, it was sort of like there was a group of people who had begun to have done the beach.
Right.
Before it came into its next iteration. I mean, one of the great things to me about South Beach and Miami Beach in general is that it keeps reinventing itself. It is the quintessential reinvention. And every time, I actually have to confess, I live on the other side of the water now. I got married and dragged off by my hair to the other side of the water. But every time I come here, it's a little bit to me like Beijing, which is a different place every time I come. Not exactly why, but you know, it is a different place every time. And even if you came last week, it's still a different place.
But it's great that you have the perspective to have seen it evolve each time and have been in the back of the limo, you might say. So.
Well, being in the back of the limo is pretty amusing, I have to say. Right. But I mean, when I first actually physically moved here, okay, so who went to the Muffin Man for breakfast?
Oh,
everybody went to the Muffin.
It really was great chicken salad.
There were
all the muffins, but the chicken salad was so good.
Well,
you can tell the food in the wine and food guy in the crowd.
And the laundry was next. Is it still next
yes,
door?
I don't. Well, was that? I have no idea. Laundry was great. I mean, there were all these, you know, sort of funny places before all the restaurants were here. I remember being at the Delano the day it opened, and I went over in the morning, and I go over and it was a mess. Okay, and I'm sitting here going, are they really going to get this finished for tonight? And they did. I mean, so we were all there, but there were all these moments with the Delano. There was nothing like the Delano anywhere on the planet.
Right.
It was the, you know, and being at the Marlin, the whole Island Outpost group. I mean, in a way, the way we travel now was in many ways really formulated here, and not by a particular design.
Right.
It was just the organic thing. But there weren't any boutique hotels in America before the Delano, really.
Right.
I mean, that was a rarity.
Ian Schrager's contribution.
And so, you know, he was here. Then over the years, you know, we've seen all these hotels open. There was a time where rate-wise, you couldn't get, I mean, you can get $100 for a hotel here for a while, and now you've got the Setai, which sells out for a 7-night minimum for $1,400 a night during Art Basel. I mean, it's a long way.
Turn.
But one of the things that has not changed is getting towed because you parked in the wrong place. This
Tremont Towing.
Yes, oh no. And if you haven't been towed, you haven't been to Miami Beach. I mean, this is just the way it is.
Gives you a warm feeling inside, doesn't it?
Oh, ever.
David, tell us who you were thinking about as far as
What Lewis said is really just so true. Different times, different gurus. Mine began with Muktananda when he took over the Cadillac Hotel on Collins Avenue. I evolved more into Krishnamurti's thought later on. And in the modern era, I would have to say Tony Goldman, the Ocean Drive Association, sitting there with Mel Schlesser, great mind. Mark Soika, great artist. Tony, artist, primarily great businessman and great promoter as well, superstar. And we just shared. Then it was like the Beatles coming together. It was the music we were playing on Ocean Drive was the music these guys were playing in the club scene, and that then got me more into wow. The way I see the architecture of Ocean Drive is live music can only happen from 9th Street to 11th Street, just because of the configurations of the buildings. So that's got to be live music. Now I was playing rock and roll. I opened for Richie Havens once in what do you call it, Cape Canaveral at a big protest up there. But anyway, so I was doing rock and roll, and I opened Mango's playing rock and roll and reggae. And the Grill was my home away from home, and then Mango's, and so I was playing rock music for the elderly, which was a whole lot of fun. But then they opened Roses on Washington Avenue. I played there with put a band together and played with, in fact, the Bee Gees drummer. So that was really cool. But getting into Mango's then was I realized the configuration of these two buildings. If I can put a roof on it, then I can contain sound. That means on Ocean Drive, I can be the only one who can contain live music till 5 in the morning. And it took me years to be able to afford an awning over the top. So then another whole bunch of years. And I was really chasing all the restaurants. I was chasing Milano's right on next door to you guys. And they were just really two cool Italian guys. And they were very much in the Ocean Drive Association as well. So we had just these early superstars. Johnny Versace was coming by my building every morning because he would go to the News Cafe every morning. And so I had my caretaker, my night caretaker, when I was sleeping upstairs, someone's got to be watching, you know. They would always, he would spend 20 minutes with my guy because he was such a cool intellectual, and they loved spending time. And I'd run into him just every once in a while because he was an early guy. I was doing parties with all these guys, so I didn't get up as early to see Johnny in the morning. But Ocean Drive became very cool. The Clevelander and the K-Boys and the K family, they were the early princes of Ocean Drive and creative in what they were doing. And they had a place down in Ocho Rios. And so they brought that reggae thing and rock, and they were doing sports bar. In fact, the Clevelander to this day is the #1 grossing sports bar in the state of Florida. Mango's began as just a little bar in between. I had to get leases, you know, I had to get into 7 other, so I figured I'll make 2 more restaurants, a Mexican restaurant, an Italian restaurant. I'll hone the liquor, and we'll do mango daiquiris, you know, and so I had my elderly people slicing up mangoes right at the end there, and they were having an absolute ball. 2,000 pounds of mangoes we did, so we were having a real ball doing that, and that became the first mango daiquiris. And live music is what I was all about, always, live entertainment. And Mango's, you know, watching the News Cafe, with Mark in the early days, when these guys were really beginning, Ocean Drive was really beginning too. And I was with Soika and Jeffrey one day, and to give you an idea of what was happening, it was, if it didn't rain on Saturday and Sunday, we'd be able to make payroll, you know, on Monday. That's the way we were living, from hand to mouth. Mango's open for 4 years, 3 years. It was still hand to mouth until all of a sudden I ran into Miguel Cruz, as you point out, a guy who played with Santana. And he came and he said, I'm going to rock this place. Let me play, David. Just let me play. This guy was a psychedelic Desi Arnaz. He's and mixed with Jimi Hendrix. He's playing the congas, rolling on the floor, complete with fire and Santeria mixed in. My girls, who were just servers, you know, we all went to their clubs. We were all, you know, my staff had a few good-looking girls. They jumped up on the bar and started dancing. I never asked anybody to do that. And so I just sat there and just watched along with everyone else, and I'm only the one who went, yeah, do it again. You know, until it got into, we have our own full-time choreographer, and our staff comes, a lot of people come from the Tropicana in Havana, which, if any of you have been able to get to Cuba, is just still a magnificent dance show. And Mango's, I looked at it as a horse race. I'm chasing Milano. And Mark Soik all of a sudden says, David, we did 1,200 covers today. 1,200 covers. And boom, the News Cafe hit.
David, I remember having my club and Tony Goldman bringing over this really short little guy. Is Mark Russian?
Israeli.
And I remember Tony Goldman, who was my landlord, 16 Collins, before he sold us the property.
Right.
I remember him bringing over this guy who didn't speak a lot of English, and he explained to me that this guy had been his superintendent, his super at his building in New York City, and please help him out, anything you could do for this guy. Well, of course, that guy ended up being Mark Zoika, who clearly did not need my help.
Right.
And we keep talking about Mark Zoika, but I remember it like it was yesterday, Tony bringing him in.
Yeah.
Barely spoke very broken English. And, you know, I think Tony owned the News Cafe.
Yes.
Sold
Yes.
it
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
Mark,
Mark-
if I'm correct.
Yeah,
Sold
Mark
it to
leased
Mark
from it,
Zoika,
yeah.
but
No. Mark is still a tenant there.
he's always still a tenant.
But but they had a real interesting thing when Mark all of a sudden went to the Cardozo,
Sure.
right? Mark lost a fortune in that little move. But then they worked out their long-term deal for this next era.
Extraordinary to watch, you know, what happened to Mark Zoika.
When you think back, though, I was just thinking about Tony, the Colony. And I remember being in there, and by this time, you know, people from the other side of the world were coming to South Beach, and there were a lot of people who were traditional socialites coming in. And I remember being at a party, actually, it was a great party. I remember this party. 2 interesting things happened. One is that Len Arison was there, and we were looking at the sugar bowls, and all the sugar packets in the sugar bowls were from Carnival Cruise Lines, which Len found quite amusing, I have to say.
Lynn's husband owned Carnival Cruise Lines.
He was the founder of Carnival, and that was pretty entertaining. The other thing was there used to be a very powerful couple here. The guy who ended up in Australia.
Joey Gersten.
Joey Gersting.
Oh my God.
This
right.
was the
They
weekend
yeah,
before.
Yeah,
Okay,
before the
this
commission-
was the
right.
week. He used
Wow.
to be a commissioner here.
Right.
Big deal.
Caught in the crack house.
Caught in a crack house, but this was the week before that, and he was saying how happy he was with his girlfriend, and they, you know, were so happy together. His life was so great, and this was the happiest he had ever been in his life. And about a week later, the headlines hit that he had been caught in the crack house with a hooker, and had fled town and went to Australia. And there's still a live warrant out for his arrest in the state of Florida, but it does not cover the rest of the U.S.
Yeah.
I know because we checked.
The fleeting fortunes.
I'd like to share that. Excuse me, Mark, that I've been fortunate in this city, in that being a graduate of University of Miami Law and a member of the Florida Bar, although not practicing law for a living, obviously, I've been able to be a part of the entire political and legislative process, first for the elderly and all elderly care law, and then all entertainment law, and anything that involved tourism, as well as being involved with every city administration since Joe Wanick was the city manager. So just even during the Alex Dowd era, which quite frankly was he was like the guy who found Las Vegas, Bugsy, but in that sense, but there actually ought to be a statue for Alex, and it never will happen, but he was the one that also, from the political side, created the ground, the space for all these guys to have that free zone that you talked about, to make their parties happen. And that political process still continues today, whereby it's not so easy in this city to do entertainment. But amen that the city is still rocking even harder, quite frankly. I think people today, and I share this with you because I'm on the cutting edge still, that we've surpassed the 207 height before the crash hit all of us, and we have surpassed that 207 height in this city.
We're
So
back again.
That's a big amen.
We're definitely back. Michael, I wanted to not leave you out of who did you think was the celebrity person? And then once we do that, I'm going to actually have you start just one more wave here, because I think to wrap this up, it's very important to talk about this last thing.
I'll try to go real quick. If I give my awards out, I would have to say that the creators of forming the Art Deco district, I would give them, the first merits, Capponi, Holnicke, even Matty Bauer, because, like I said, they laid the groundwork for this. I definitely agree with Johnny Versace, Bruce Weber, bringing the fashion industry and everything. Later, more in my era, it was the birth of Ocean Drive magazine. Sylvester Stallone popped in town one day. At the time he was a very big actor. I've never seen more beautiful women in my life. I'm buying a house here. At the time, Planet Hollywood was a very big, celebrity thing. Keith Barish, got here. He opened Planet Hollywood in the Grove. I remember being at Sly's house after Planet Hollywood opening. There must have been 75 celebrities. I mean, every single person from Johnny Depp to, Christian Slaters and Kate Mosses, and so that was a whole second wave, I think, that we got, which I think lasted pretty strong until late '90s, and now we have a different type of celebrities coming here.
Kardashians came into town.
So people still jump into town, man, here and there. Not in droves, maybe, not in those kind of droves, but they still jump on in.
There we go.
That's great. So the last thing I want to cover is, if you look at this group, they all started as, very young in their careers, in this business, in South Beach, and they're still here with us. Now, I'd like to just have them tell you what they're doing now, because I think that's an interesting, if they made and were participants and were formative in the nightlife and the entertainment aspects of early South Beach. I'd like you to see where that leads into, in life now. So starting with you, Michael.
If you don't mind, I just forgot two things I want to leave people out. Vicky Rourke was one of the, celebrities of the time. And, not just because Lewis is here, but I saw it firsthand. We had all this kind of bait and ammunition, but at the end of the day, Lewis was almost like the unofficial PR person for Miami Beach. Because what happened is, I remember being in British Vogue when the cover was Miami. And Lewis helped organize that article. And then I remember being on the cover of Details magazine, and it was, Lewis that organized that. The cover of Interview magazine, cover of American Vogue said Miami, and big, so that's what made the difference between what you're talking about, 1992, of being like, you know, can we break even, to 1993, where we got too many people. So I think Louis had a lot to do with that.
Louis
So.
Canales. Okay, so the question is, what are you doing now, Michael? What is it that, you know, what's driving you?
We wear a chameleon outfit and try to keep keep up with the ever-changing South Beach. I mean, I'm very proud of what Miami's become today. It's a, you know, it's an international, diversified, you know, major city. You know, I would say that, you know, Miami and New York are going to be, you know, to be the most important cities in America for years and years to come. And that's a big stepping stone. I mean, I remember when we were, you know, we were in that little village thing, and everybody was, should we invest here or not? Is this just going to be a fad? This place is not going to last another more. Remember those times? And you know, so it's really solidified. It's part of history now. So, and as the Delano was like, you know, the new kind of forerunner after the hotels like the Centuries and stuff, then, you know, came the big ones, the W's, the Surprise, the, you know, the rebirth of Fountain Blues and stuff. And so it's forever evolving. And now we're probably going to get into the Gentings, and, you know, whether you like it or not, it's just, this is the forever changing Miami.
So check out Michael at the Capponi Group, and you can see all of the diversified things that he's doing in South Florida and actually in all the Caribbean Basin now. So, David.
Well, the cutting edge would be, I did an interview for the Miami Herald today regarding casinos and what my point of view was. And it's really, again, the way you look at South Beach and its success, it's all based on scale. Everything is quaint. Everything is within its right scale. And if that was not Genting size, but anything within its right scale, can be a benefit for the community. Anything out of its scale can kill everything around it. With that said, what I do is Mango's Tropical Cafe, and amen, it's a phenomenon today, even more so. It happens to be east of Las Vegas, the #1 grossing restaurant nightclub in the country, and it's because of the stars that work there and what they do, and being the coolest Latin burlesque thing around. So that being said, I'm also in the design district. Ross Power and myself did one of the early restaurant nightclubs over there, restaurant nightclub, the first, Power Studios. And I'm right at the edge of investing $5 to $6 million to now make that the premier restaurant nightclub of the design district and symbolic of the renaissance of the city of Miami. And that will be totally, you know, a Miami kind of a thing, which is a different kind of a painting for me to do. It'll be very New York, very bistro, very some rock, poetry, Latin, jazz, every genre of music with art gallery, recording studio. I can do architecture, I can do landscaping with a whole backyard over there, and create another whole thing, as well as all of a sudden Caesars is wooing us with a major location in their exciting new gigantic Ferris wheel project in Las Vegas. And so I'm taking a good look at that, and that's what I'm doing. As well as helping a lot of people work and earn a living and feed their children.
That you do. Jane.
Oh, I've morphed from going out all night and sending my clothes out without me to, I'm not joking when I say I've had 50 jobs at the Herald. I actually ran I ran the first editorial website. There was a web publication back in the 90s. Long time ago now in technology time, but I'm along with being the business editor at the Herald, I still do a lot of travel writing, and I also, for reasons that don't bear contemplation, oversee our coverage of the arts. or part of the arts, the visual arts. And I just did a story for the LA Times in my spare time about Miami as an arts destination. And I think that, for me, has been the next iteration, whether we're talking about the beach with Art Basel, the New World Symphony, Midtown, Wynwood, that I think for me that's the next iteration of this place is as an arts destination and the things that stem from that.
If you're listening, you're picking up, you know, Michael in Haiti, you know, David, Las Vegas, New York. It's like Miami's going out and conquering some of the other parts of the world. How about you, Lee?
I moved off the beach in '95 to the Design District, where I still live today. Joined Southern Wine and Spirits in 2000 as their VP of Corporate Communications, and in that role started the South Beach Wine and Food Festival in 2001, and just celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, and launched the New York City Wine and Food Festival in 2007, and the LA Wine and Food Festival last year. I wrote a book last year of the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, and I am working on another book with a Food Network personality on the art of the hamburger.
Cool. Cool.
We're eating up everything that you're doing, Lee. Finally, Louis.
Just to sidetrack for one moment, I don't know how many folks here remember when the sidewalk on Ocean Drive, you had to walk Indian file.
I
Go down to
remember.
it. And again, it was the Ocean Drive Association and Tony Goldman who spearheaded actually moving Ocean Drive several feet onto Loomis Park so we could have all those wonderful sidewalk cafes and bars on Ocean Drive. And they should be credited for
Absolutely.
that, which it really made a difference.
That was the kickoff.
And as well with me, I'm creative director of Fine Art Publishing House, and I love it, and it's great, and it's located in Wynwood. And, still love the beach, and it is what it is, and it's wonderful that we were all here to be able to be part of its renaissance. And it has evolved, and like anything that's organic. And today it is what it is, and it's going to be this way for X amount of times, and then it will change again and again. And as James said, it's like Madonna. It's the ultimate reinvention. Keeps reinventing itself, and that's very exciting because that's what keeps a place alive and growing. And it's good to have been part with these wonderful people as well as others with at the beginning of it all.
I'd like to thank this illustrious group for their time. As you can see, these are very important people who are doing great things, not only here, but around the world. So thank you once again. Thank also the Miami Design Preservation League for their great Art Deco weekend. By the way,